I don't even know what could have been done to get me out of that, right? Like I was so far deep in it at that point where I was just so tense and almost panicky every time, that it was my turn to make a play, which is crazy. And it's not me, like looking back on my career, like I know that's not who I was, but
Right.
that day, for whatever reason, I just was not feeling it.
Hello and welcome back to the Next Act podcast. I'm your host, Keaton Hall, joined by my co-host, Matthew Roop. Before we do anything, go subscribe. Make sure you download these episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Go to our YouTube where you can see our faces that were made for radio, and make sure you subscribe to or follow Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, because that's where you can get a lot of short form content. It's 30 seconds of your day, 60 seconds of your day, so you don't have to listen to a whole 30 to hour-long conversation right here, and you're still able to get a good boost. So I'm joined, like I said, by my co-host, Matthew Roop. Matthew, how's it going today?
It's great. And before we hop into too much stuff, I just want to say that this episode is brought to you by Danny Rojas from the hottest TV show on the market, Ted Lasso, because football is life.
Football is life, and that's an unofficial sponsor. Apple, please don't come at us. We just like Danny Rojas, and we thought he'd be great to be the unofficial sponsor of this podcast.
Unofficial.
Unofficial. All right, so this is a continuance of our host series using your first act and your next act, and I really like our topic today, and I think it's a very subtle difference, but I think it's a very important difference. So Matthew, let me kick it over to you, and you can introduce this topic for us.
Yeah, like Keaton said, we're going to tackle, I think a pretty pertinent and relevant topic. And it's all about, making a play versus avoiding making a mistake. And while those things might seem like they go hand in hand, there can be a distinct difference in how you act and how you go about doing your job, right? If you're worried about making a mistake compared to, making the correct play. So I think we're going to dive into, the mindset that's behind the difference in those two things, and we're going to kind of break down our experiences and then how that's translated into where we are now.
I think the first time I was introduced to this concept as an actual concept that I could apply was in driver's ed when I was 14 years and 8 months old in Michigan. My driver instructor, Mr. R, he said that when we're on the road, we need to look at where we're going to go instead of where we don't want to go. So we didn't end up in a ditch because he said you're going to end up where you're focusing on. And if you're focusing on going up the road and around the curve, then you're going to get to your destination. But if you're focused on, oh my gosh, I don't want to go into this ditch, I really hope I don't go into this ditch, and you're looking at it, then chances are you're going to find yourself in that position in the spot you didn't want to be. And it's because energy goes where your focus flows. I think Tony Robbins said that. But that's the first time I got introduced to that concept. Matthew, what was the first time you kind of realized that was a thing in your life?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the big things that, was kind of instilled in high school basketball was instead of, taking shots, our coach called us shot makers, right? You don't want to be a shot taker, you want to be a shot maker, right? Because you're focusing kind of like where you want it to go, right? You want it to go in the hoop. You're not just taking the shot to take the shot, right? You're taking the shot because you want to make it, you want to score points. So I think that was the first time that, and I'm sure it snuck in its way elsewhere, but that's the first time that it kind of really like clicked in a kind of a mindset shift. It seems kind of corny, but it worked for me. So props to Coach Reinhardt on that one.
No, for sure. I can, as a basketball player, relate to that very specifically. That was a huge change for me. And for me, I phrased it a little bit differently, but I wanted to shoot to make it, not just because I was open and knew what I was supposed to do. And that's what I told all my teammates. That's what I told kids now that I help with. And every time that I would shoot to make it with that focus of making it, most of the time it went in. Obviously, I'm not Steph Curry or 1,000% shooter, but being able to put that energy and focus into making the shot turned out a lot better than trying not to miss it most of the time. So, in your first act as a soccer player, what's a specific example that you found yourself being able to go make a play instead of avoid a mistake?
Yeah, I think, for me, I'll talk about the first one, probably the worst game that I ever played at Manchester. I just couldn't pass our team the ball. And it was just one of those. By the end of it, I was just like, don't give me the ball. I can't find our team, and that was me strictly avoiding making mistakes, right? And I think in my head, it was me doing what's best for the team, right? Don't give me the ball because I'm just going to give it to the other team. But I think there was a struggle there for me mentally, right? Like, of course I can pass it to our team, right? Like I'd been doing it. I was probably a sophomore or junior, so I'd been doing it for a year or two already at the collegiate level.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a distinct moment I have of me just like trying to avoid making a mistake. Like it was just one of those days. I think everybody's kind of experienced that, but that just sticks out in my mind as one of those days where I didn't want anything to do with the ball that day because I didn't want to make a mistake.
Yeah. When you were in that state of avoid a mistake and not think you could do anything right, how would you say you felt in terms of like your mindset and your demeanor? Was it more of you felt uptight and you were trying so hard not to do anything wrong?
Yeah, man, it was like borderline panicky, like jittery, super uptight. And another thing that like I did a fairly good job of like thinking about other people and trying to help them, but it was all about me that day, which is you kind of understand,
Mm-hmm.
being a leader on the basketball team, right? Like you're always thinking about other people and how you can kind of help them. But for me, like I wasn't really myself. It didn't feel like, right. I was super uptight, only thinking about me in my own head, and I just making it worse. There was no. I don't even know what could have been done to get me out of that, right? Like I was so far deep in it at that point where I was just so tense and almost panicky every time, that it was my turn to make a play, which is crazy. And it's not me, like looking back on my career, like I know that's not who I was, but
Right.
that day for whatever reason I just was not feeling it.
Yeah. Everyone that is an athlete, and I mean anyone even if they're not an athlete can relate to that feeling of you just feel so uptight and everything seemed like it's sped up, and it's kind of the opposite of what coaches tell you, like let the game slow down for you. Like it seems like it's going 100 miles an hour and you don't have time to think, and it's all just about like I need to make the first reaction that comes to my mind, and so I can just not have the ball on me, and so I don't make a mistake. For me, there was something that I think paints a picture of this distinction pretty well. There was a play that got run for me my senior year, well, my 5th year, and I would be on the wing. Point guard would come down the left side, go to the left wing, and then our 4 and 5, they'd be at the elbows. They would turn toward me, come set a double screen. I'd have to run off the screens, curl around on the top of the 3-point line, get a pass, and then hopefully get an open look and knock it in. The distinction that was often made between a make and miss in that scenario, if I was focused on, okay, I really hope that I don't mess up going around the screen, and I really hope I don't miss the catch, and I really hope I don't miss the shot. I felt so uptight, and it was almost a guarantee. I was almost asking to miss the shot after that. And if I was playing loose and I had that confidence and I was looking to make a play, I was shooting to make it instead of just shooting because I was open, my mind would be at, okay, my defender's on my hip right now. I need to set him up so I can go get him on the screen, go around the screen, so it's going to be effective that my guys are actually going to hit him and I'm going to get some free space. And then once I get an inch of space, then I'm going to catch it and I'm going to go right up and it's going to be a 3 for us and we're going to go up. And that distinction is very subtle, but it makes all the difference in the world. And I think to further kind of go into detail of why it worked, as I was going through playing loose and I was thinking of things I had to do in order to be successful, there's like very limited options in terms of like what worked for that play specifically. So that allowed my focus to go to those few things in order to try and guarantee that success. If I'm trying to not mess up and avoid mistakes, as opposed to there being like 1 or 2 things that you can do to be successful, there's 1,000 things you can do to mess up a play. And it's a lot easier it's way harder to focus on all of those things in a very short amount of time if you're trying to avoid a mistake like that. So for me, that was an example of this concept, and I encountered it a lot when I was playing.
Yeah, and it can be tough, right? First off, that play was called Carolina at Harrison, so I know that play very well. It was never run for me, just for the audience out there. I was usually the one passing the ball. We didn't need me shooting it.
A floor
Um,
general.
yeah, absolutely. Everybody's got their role. But I think you made a couple key distinctions there about focusing on once again the process, right, of how you get to that shot. How many times do you think you practiced that shot in practice?
Oh, thousands. I mean, specifically coming off, I would throw myself the ball, and I would take like 3 steps, like running, like simulating running into it, and then that turn off the pivot foot, and then making sure the outside foot drove into the floor enough so I went straight up and down instead of lifting right to left, and then thousands of times for sure.
Yeah, and so there's a couple key stats that I always like to go back to, or not necessarily stats, but just things that I've heard. Kobe Bryant used to always say that he wanted practice to be harder than the game, right? He never feared a last second shot because he'd taken that shot a million times before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere on the floor, wherever he was going to catch it, he's taken that shot before, so he knew he was going to make it.
Yep.
There's also a stat that professional golfers, I forget what distance it is, but when they're standing over a putt, their heart rate actually drops. Like the really good ones. I think it might have been Tiger. So his heart rate drops when he's in a pressure situation, which is crazy. But I have to think that it goes back to him saying, I hit this shot 1,400 times in the last year, right? Like, and so I think it goes back to that preparation point, right? And what you did to kind of get to your spot, I think can kind of help you overcome that avoiding a mistake versus, making a play. I think the preparation there is a key point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like we said, it's a very subtle difference, but makes all the difference in the world in terms of having that confidence in order. Well, I think to back up a little bit, the things that precluded those states of if we're feeling panicky and uptight and just trying to think things are going 100 miles an hour versus we're relaxed, our heart rate drops, like you said, in the golf high pressure situation, and we're looking to make a play, things are slowing down. I think there's a few things that preclude being able to do that. And like you just hit on, one of them is preparation and doing all the things that are necessary to build up that confidence and build up that skill set, because confidence without ability is delusion. And so you obviously want to have confidence, but if you don't have the reps and the skill to back up that confidence, then it's not going to serve you very, very well if you come down to a spot where you need to actually perform and use that skill. So I think the preparation is a huge part of it, but also, as you know, the mental side of things is also huge, and trusting all of that work you put in order to get you to that point are two huge things that were big for us in our first acts, but I think, well, I know also applies to anywhere in your next act as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that piece to fall back on, right, is crucial for when you get in that tough situation, that tough mental mindset. Hey, I've been here before, but I've made this shot in the past, or maybe I
Mm-hmm.
missed that last one, but I know that I can make this one in the future. Just having that preparation, that background to kind of fall back on, I think is can always be like a check for your confidence, right? So your confidence doesn't ever get back below this point because you put in enough preparation that your floor is here now rather than down here. So I think just
Mm-hmm.
having that ability and that preparation or that point to kind of always fall back on is huge.
For sure. And as we know, whenever we go into, well, it's the same thing with other things like a test. You always felt way better going into a test knowing you had studied for it, as opposed to if you tried to cram for it the night before. I mean, it's such a simple concept, but it's so easy not to do because there's so many other things that are competing for our attention instead of preparing for a certain thing. And the give and take of it is, yeah, we're going to give up some time right now in order to prepare for this thing that is going to help us enjoy and perform at a level that we are able to enjoy and are able to go out and know that we did well, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to use this time to not prepare and it's going to be nice right now, but I'm not going to set myself up to be in a position I'm going to put myself in a position of being panicky and things are going 100 miles an hour and I'm not going to feel great. And then it just creates more kind of bad feelings and bad performance on the back end. So it's a lot of it just comes down to what you're willing to do in order to prepare as well.
And that's like that short-term long set versus that long-term mindset, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we'll use basketball as an example because we're both fairly familiar with that. But if you're going in the gym and you're putting in the extra work, right? you can either skip that and maybe you go to a party, maybe you play some Xbox, whatever you're doing, you can skip going to the gym. But then when it comes time to show up for the game and make shots, the guy who put in the effort at the beginning is going to make the shots when it matters.
Hmm.
So I think you just got to, be aware, put your priorities in order and kind of understand where you want to get. And sometimes that involves making some sacrifices.
Hmm. No, 100%. Definitely love that. Or as we're looking to use our first act in our next act, how does that concept of making a play versus avoiding a mistake, how does that look like for you right now?
Yeah, just not being afraid to try some stuff if you have the best interests in the team. And so, for me, now that, we're kind of in season, whether that's, making a substitution or playing a formation that might be a little bold, understanding that if, the coaching staff thinks that it's the correct opportunity and the correct, if we truly believe in the action that we're taking, it could backfire. But if we think it's in the best interest of the team and have the best interest in mind, then why wouldn't we do it, right? So just understanding that, you know, that it's sometimes you got to take a risk if that's what you think is best, and sometimes you fall on your face, and sometimes you look like a hero, and sometimes you're somewhere in the middle, and that's life. And so just understand, if we've scouted a team and we think that this formation is going to be best, and we go out there and we fall on our faces, like we did our preparation, right? We put in the work, so we should, be confident in what we're doing. But sometimes it doesn't work out, and that's just life, and you learn from it and you move on. And I think understanding that sometimes it's not going to work out to how you planned. I've recently had a little bit more of a better mindset about that. Just understanding that sometimes you just got to roll with the punches and go with the flow and kind of see
Yep.
what happens. You can't plan everything, which sometimes is nice, and I tell my fiance that all the time. But sometimes you just gotta roll with the punches and kind of see what it brings. I know you're in a little bit different situation, but kind of how does that look in your life right now?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of things that require preparation in my next act that I'm currently in right now. And for those who don't know, I know we've touched on it a little bit in prior episodes, but I'm an auditor for a public accounting firm right now and going through busy season. And just in general, when you are on a job, you are communicating with clients, you're communicating with, in my position as a senior associate, I'm in charge of the whole engagement in terms of the project management aspect of it. And so I'm communicating with the client, I'm communicating with my associates and giving them work to do. I'm delegating work to them, reviewing their work. I'm getting things ready for manager and partner review. And so a lot of times we'll have check-in meetings with the client and with our internal team anywhere between 1 and 3 times a week. And so if I'm not prepared for those meetings, then I'm going to look really bad and I'm not going to instill a lot of confidence in the client or my team members that I'm on top of things. And so being able to make sure, hey, I'm going to prepare and make sure I'm doing these things that I need to do in order to move this file along. And so I can come to the partner, come to the client with results and resulting questions that I need their answers for instead of not being prepared. And whenever I get asked a question, I'm not able to answer it like that for me, that goes back to the feeling of, okay, I'm not ready for a test and I feel panicky and I feel uptight and everything's going 100 miles an hour and I can't think. By putting time, and a lot of times it's a little bit extra work just to get things ready. But if I'm able to do that in advance of these meetings and in advance of these deadlines, kind of weekly and daily check-ins, make sure the progress is going along, I feel so much better. I feel so much more confident in whatever question I'm going to get asked. I don't feel like things are going 100 miles an hour. I'm able to make sure I'm staying along with the plan, executing the plan, and that brings so much peace and it brings so much confidence that just builds on each other. And that's been the biggest thing for me in kind of like my daily work, but also for this podcast too. If I were to come on to this call with you and not know what we're talking about, then it just creates a whole different dynamic in what we talk about and how our conversation goes and the quality of things, as opposed to if we were to just, then like we prepared multiple days leading up, constant communication back and forth with each other. Hey, what do you think about this? Insert it into the conversation. Or, okay, let's take this out and put this in instead. Like, there's just so much benefit that comes to that preparation that precludes being able to go make a play instead of avoid a mistake. And that's something I found to be very applicable for me right now in my next act.
Did you have to relearn how to prepare? Like
Oh, for sure.
in basketball, right? You knew you got in the gym, you knew your plays, you knew that kind of stuff. But I'm sure there was an adjustment period for you where you had to relearn how to prepare for your current role. What was that kind of like for you?
Mm-hmm. No, I love that question. I love that question a lot because it's like we were talking about off camera. Every new level that you get to, you're going to be a novice at, and you're going to suck at it until you learn what it takes and the skills to develop in order to get you to where you used to be in terms of higher performance. And so relearning what preparation not only was, but also how I could implement that was a huge learning curve for sure, because going into it, this is my third busy season, just finishing up. But the first two, there were so many things I had no idea what to do with, and so I didn't know how to prepare. And so there was a lot of times where I'd just be asking so many questions, or I felt like I was asking too many questions and I wouldn't want to ask a question. And then it was a snowball effect on trying not to make a mistake. And it was really hard for me to make a play because I didn't know how to do that in that scenario. And so the ways that I had to relearn how to do that, a lot of it was just making mistakes, going through and putting myself in situations that I was not comfortable with. I'd never been in before, but knowing that I had a senior associate and a manager and a partner that were there to help me correct mistakes and actually learn why I was doing things and how to make things effective and efficient. That's a process that you're going to have to just make a lot of mistakes with, and it's going to suck for a little while, but it's just part of the process of relearning how to prepare.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned, having conversations with people who are more experienced than you. And I think when you struggle with your internal confidence, surrounding yourself with people who can build you up is great. I don't think you should rely on that by any means, but having people in your corner that can kind of help you out when it's low, I think is a phenomenal way to kind of rebuild your confidence and kind of understand and shift your mindset back, right? And for our guys, I try to be that guy for our guys, right? I try to be as positive as I can because I understand the struggles they're going through. I mean, they're 18, 19, 20 years old, trying to figure it out. And I think a big thing that I always tell them is I don't care what decision you make. I just want you to make the decision with confidence. So they're going to make mistakes. They're going to make the wrong choice. But I want them to make it with confidence, right? The absolute worst thing for me is when you're so hesitant that you don't know, you're just standing, you're stuck in no man's land. Now you didn't make a play. Maybe you could have made a play. Who knows? But now you don't even give yourself a chance to make a play because you're so scared of avoiding it and doing the wrong thing, right? If you're confident in what you're doing, maybe you stumble into a success that you shouldn't have had, but you tried, right? Like, you know, strange things happen sometimes, but if you try, sometimes it works out. But also I think it's a better learning experience if you're trying to put in that work and trying to do the right things, right? It's easier as a coach, as a boss, to kind of adjust the mindset of those kids who are trying to do the right thing rather than those who are trying not to mess up.
For sure. Well, and then if you're in that position of making a mistake, but you were there and trying to make a play, oftentimes it's a lot easier to show you the tweak you have to make, the adjustment you have to make in order to be successful in that scenario, instead of just being told, hey, you have to do this. And then you don't really know what it looks like. You don't know what it feels like until you go out and do it. And so that is another key distinction there. But the concept of, I believe I've heard it called paralysis by analysis, of having so many choices and not being confident in anything, and then you end up just being in the same place and not doing anything that could have helped you move along, is a very good point you make right there.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? And when you're in the middle of a game or you're in the office trying to figure out what to do, sometimes it can be overwhelming. But, sometimes maybe you ask a question, what should I do at this point? If you have time or in the game, I think you just got to go for it. And I think, the people around you, if you're trying to do the right things, I think will understand and will help you get to where you need to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What did that concept of relearning preparation look like for you? Because I know as an assistant coach at your alma mater, you've been through the player side of it. how has that changed for you? Was it a big learning curve? Because I mean, you've been around the game, you know it obviously, but being on that side of it is obviously different.
Yeah, you think you know everything until you're in the office trying to write stuff down on the whiteboard. You think you know what the coaching staff goes through,
Mm-hmm.
um, but there's obviously a lot more to it, and there's a lot of layers to what's going on. And I think for me, the awesome part of being back in my alma mater is I know the school, right? I know, I understand what Manchester is about and that kind of stuff, which made my transition a little bit easier. Whereas if,
Mm-hmm.
going to a completely new location and new school, that can be tough. But there's still a lot of a lot of nuances that I didn't fully understand. Especially my time at Ohio State was definitely different. Just, working with, scholarships and stuff like that, which was, a totally new concept. Like, obviously, we're all armchair quarterbacks when it comes to it, right? Oh, that guy shouldn't be getting a full ride. This guy, right? Like,
Yep.
it's easy when you're sitting behind the screen and you're looking at it from a distance, but when you're up close to it, there's so many other factors that you just have to take into consideration. And sometimes, you really don't fully understand what everyone's going through until you're in their shoes. And like that even carries over from like us. If I was at my role at even a school in our same conference, like the situation is completely different. So you really don't understand what you're kind of getting into until you're kind of in that moment and in the shoes of where you are. So it was definitely a little bit of a learning curve trying to understand and trying to do best for our guys for my team. So it took a little bit of a time to understand, and obviously being efficient with my time. I felt like there were times where I was just sitting in the office forever, and now that I've kind of been in the shoes a little bit, I can understand how to be a little more efficient with my time, which has been good. So I trying to avoid that burnout. I mean, obviously I'm not anywhere close. I'm loving what I'm doing, but there's I've become more efficient in my preparation. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, then race cars, they don't take pit stops. They don't need to take pit stops in order to last the whole race, but they take pit stops so they can perform at a high level throughout the entire race. And so learning how to be efficient and effective, like you said, and find those pockets of time where you see improvement is huge, because if you can see improvement, that helps defeat burnout, because you can see progress toward that goal down the line and you just see yourself getting closer and closer. So that's a key distinction you make for sure. As you've been transitioned over to an assistant coach, how did you figure out what making a play versus avoiding mistakes looks like in this perspective of things? Was it hard to figure that out, or was it kind of easy?
It was trial by fire, just trying some stuff. For me, only being removed from being a player for a couple years helps me understand the mindset that our guys are in. So trying to do right by them and understanding their needs and wants and that kind of stuff, I think is a big strength that I have in my current situation. Just because I mean, I'm only 4, 5, 6 years older than some of these guys, so like I
Yeah.
understand what they're going through. So just understanding what it was like to be a player and then trying stuff and failing, man. Like I coaching club soccer, so like 7-year-olds, was the best and worst thing that I've done so far in my coaching career. It was a great opportunity for me to like try stuff and fail because they didn't know any better. But I would leave some of those sessions and just being like, man, like that was a terrible session. The kids walk, oh, great session today, coach. I loved it. I'm like, I'm glad you did, but like for me in the back of my head, I was like, man, I got to do better, right? So just finding ways, and that was a great platform for me to just try stuff, which is awesome. But I remember walking out of one of my first sessions at club and just being like, holy cow, that was atrocious. Like, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, and just understanding that it's going to take time, right? Like I thought I would be ready to step in and take over a team and do that. And like you kind of mentioned with your role in the last episode, you thought that you were really good at managing, right? At the project management. And I thought I would be a decent coach, right? But there's still stuff that we have to learn. And I think, just trying stuff and understanding that, I'm not there yet, and that's okay. And just taking stuff, that I liked, that I didn't like, and just applying that to the next session, and then continuing to build off that.
Yeah, I love that. And I believe we talked about it in our initial episode that we had together, but there's only so much you can learn without going and actually doing it and putting
Yeah.
yourself in that position. So I think that's a great piece of advice for anyone who's unsure how to go make a play and how not to avoid a mistake in where they're currently at. You just got to go do it sometimes. Nike said it best, just do it, right?
Shooters
So
got to shoot.
shooters got to shoot, baby. So as we kind of trend toward the outro, what are some things that you do to catch yourself when you find yourself in a mistake or trying to avoid a mistake, and how do you bring yourself back into that mindset of making a play instead?
Yeah, I think for me, it's conversations with people that understand what I'm in, what I'm doing. That the head coach here is a great resource for me. Just kind of, talking through things with him, like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And sometimes it's, hey, you need to be, you know, more aggressive is kind of for a lack of a better term, but like it's okay to do stuff if you think it's okay in the best nature for
Mm-hmm.
the team. But just I think that's the big thing for me is when I start to question some decisions and start to well, let's maybe go for the safe option. It's having those conversations with those that are close to me and those that understand the position I'm in, and kind of talking through some options with them, and kind of going that route. What are some tools that you kind of use to kind of help shift that mindset back to making a play?
Yeah, absolutely. I've found that imposter syndrome is very easy to fall prey to in a situation where you're not sure if you know the right thing to do and you're the one that people are looking to for answers. And so I found myself in that position a lot because as an in charge, I'm supposed to be the one that is able to answer questions for associates that are looking to me for, hey, how do I do this thing? And I'm the person that managers and partners are looking to in terms of like, hey, why was this thing done? And is there an answer for XYZ? And it took a lot of time just being in like that industry and in my job and getting more knowledge and getting more confidence by going and doing specific like work papers and working on certain sections, just getting more confidence through repetition. And it was weird, that transition of, okay, I'm the one that's supposed to be asking questions to, okay, I'm the one getting asked questions for answers. So I need to know stuff. Like that was one of the biggest things that it's tough to overcome an imposter syndrome like that. But the only thing that really remedies it is having confidence through repetition, because like we said, confidence without actual ability is just delusion. So confidence and repetition and preparation are so key and go together so much in order to make a play instead of avoid a mistake. So I think that's been one of the biggest adjustments for me, and something that I've had to really carry over from my first act is the preparation in order to be confident enough to go make that play in my position right
Yeah,
now.
absolutely. And I think like there's a fine line between like fake it till you make it and imposter syndrome, right? Like
For
I
sure.
think there is some validity to fake it till you make it. So I started when I was at Ohio State. I started helping out with a lot of the on campus visits, and I ended up doing a lot of the tours towards the end of my time there. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like I would go on the tours when the assistant coach would give it when I first got there. So like I did my preparation, right? Like I studied. But even then, when I was on my own driving in the car with mom and dad and the kid, and it's just the four of us driving around, Ohio State is huge, right? Like
Massive.
I don't know a quarter of the buildings on campus, and they're like asking me questions. Like, and I'll be honest, there are times where I told a bold faced lie, or I had no idea what that building was, but today that's the music building.
Yep.
Like, and so, but then you go back and you kind of learn some stuff as you kind of go through with trial by fire, but just kind of
Mm-hmm.
acting confident and can be good. But as you said, like that imposter syndrome, at some point it starts to settle in. So I think there's a really good fine line between that. But fake it till you make it is not a terrible short term solution there. And I apologize to anybody I gave a tour at Ohio State and told them it was the music building.
No, I love that. That's a great distinction to make. I think as long as we are actively working, like we did talked about in our last episode, working while you wait, in order to get to a point where we have that skill and knowledge behind that confidence. So it's been another quality conversation, Matthew. Number 2 as co-host. This is it's fantastic. Anything else you want to add before we close it out?
I don't think so, man. I think we summed it up pretty good. So I'll throw it back to you, Keto.
Well, if you're listening this far, we appreciate you. Again, if you feel led, go subscribe, go follow, go throw us some likes. If not, then we appreciate you anyway. We're not doing it for likes right now. We're just hoping to see it grow so we can reach more people and have a good time while doing it. So for me, my name is Keaton Hall. For my co-host, Matthew Roop, we are excited to continue to have more Next Act conversations. And until next time, let's make sure the best is still yet to come.